All right. Good morning, everyone. Again, this is Friday, and if it's Friday, it is Environmental Fridays. It is personal. So you can see here the link to our website. And on the next page, you can see also a QR code that would get you there as well. This is season 7. 15 episodes, 16 guest speakers from Atlanta, Tobago. In fact, today our speaker is from, at least resides in New York. So we have a wide diversity of speakers, not only in topics, but where they come from. As you could see here, for example, our November schedule. Of course, today, November 1, we will hear from the rabbi, and you will hear his introduction here pretty soon. Next week, we will hear a speaker from Jamaica, Northern Caribbean University. Then back to the States, we'll have a speaker from University of Minnesota talking about the African lion and impacts there. The following week, we go to Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago. There was an oil spill last year, and Nakia will tell us all about that. And then finally, one of my colleagues here at Andrews University, architecture professor, will talk about green architecture. So that's our lineup for November. Exciting as always. One of the reasons and motivations, not only for Environmental Fridays, but for the environmental movement, for the origin of Earth Day, was this photo. It's considered to be one of the most iconic photo in all of human history. It was taken by an astronaut, Bill Anders, in Apollo 8. And this really changed people's views about how precious our Earth is. This is our home, our blue home. And um, what we try to do, by the way, the QR code here would get you to a YouTube interview of Bill Anders and gives you more background um, to this photograph. So what we try to do here in Environmental Fridays each week is to try and address what the United Nations Environmental Program considers to be the Earth's triple threats in terms of um, the environment, pollution, climate change, loss of biodiversity. These things affect each other. They are intersected with each other. And what we try to do is bring awareness and encourage action, bring education and foster engagement. Last week, we had the perspective of the first peoples of the Caribbean. This week, we'll have the perspective of Judaism um, in regards to the environment. Our guest host today is right here in St. Joseph. Her name is Jennifer. And Jennifer, you would have to help me with your last name,
Zarenner.
Zarena. And
Mhm.
she is president nominee. Does that mean that you are going to be president for the upcoming year?
2 years. In 2 years.
In two years. Okay, you guys
Mhm.
plan really well.
Yeah. A lot of time to like train and make sure we're still in it.
Okay. So she's the president nominee of the Rotary Club of St. Joseph, and she had interest in being part of Environmental Fridays, and I could see why. She's the co-founder of the Rotary Club's Environmental Committee, Public Image Chair. She has a Master's of Science in Community Health and Prevention Science from the University of Cincinnati. So, Jennifer, this is your turn to introduce our speaker for today.
I would love to. So today we have Rabbi Mordechai Becher, originally from Australia. He's a professor of Jewish studies at Yeshiva University in New York. He received his ordination from the Chief Rabbinate of Israel and the Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem, and he holds a master's in medieval Jewish history. He presents a Talmud class for the Jewish Broadcasting Service, and he has a book called Gateway to Judaism, and it's in its 10th printing. He's taught in the US, Canada, England, Israel, South Africa, Australia, and Russia, and he's a scholar in residence for Legacy Kosher Tours. He's led tours in Africa, Australia, Asia, Europe, Central America, and the Middle East. He's all over.
Yes, yes, a world traveler.
Yes. Welcome, Rabbi.
All right, Rabbi, you could share your screen
Yep.
again.
I will do that. Okay.
All right, very
How's that? Good?
It's good.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you very much for the introduction. I can hardly wait to hear myself speak now. But today is not only Environmental Friday, but for those who occasionally look at the sky, it is also and I seem to be having. There we go. It is also, don't worry, I will have translations. Do not get scared. That's Hebrew. But aside from it being Environmental Friday, it's also the new moon. And the new moon in the Jewish calendar means a new month. And there's a psalm that we say in our prayers every time it's a new month. And it is Psalm 104, which I have here, as you can see, in the English. And I think it's very appropriate to start with this, because since it is Environmental Friday and it is the new moon, and it is something which in our prayers this morning we said this, so it is King David's appreciation of the world, appreciation of nature. And when you read it, and again, it's in translation here, and as a great Italian poet once said, reading poetry in translation is like kissing someone through a curtain. So, which is not ideal, as you can imagine. So in any case, but what King David does is he talks about the beautiful world, that God is great, clothed in glory. He talks about the winds, the flames are his servants. He established and as we know, occasional bushfires are actually good for the environment. Problem is when they're clear cut, it doesn't happen. And he established the earth on its foundation. He talks about the mountains. He talks about the spring and the birds of the sky and the foliage and the water, and the grass grow for the cattle, herbage for man's labor, wine that cheers the hearts of men, oil that makes the face shine, bread that sustains man's life, the mountains for the ibex, which of course live in the Dead Sea region of Israel, crags, a refuge for the hyrax, also a small creature that lives there, and the lions roar for prey. It's just a very beautiful psalm, which I think it's worthwhile, Psalm 104, if you have a book of Psalms, to read it every now and again. We do it every month as part of our liturgy, and to give that type of appreciation. And of course, we associate also in Jewish tradition, animals and plants are used as symbols and as metaphors for many, many ideas. There's approximately 120 animal species mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, and those animal species were all animals that lived in the Israel, the Middle Eastern region, and it was important to know them because you can understand, for example, things that we learned from them. Just to give you just one example, this is in a section called the Chapters of the Fathers. That's in the Mishnah, written in around 170 CE. in the north of Israel, in which we are told by Yehuda ben Tamer, be as audacious as a leopard. You might know that leopards are audacious creatures. They will attack prey 10 times their size. They have no fear. So we are told, be as audacious as a leopard, meaning no fear, do what is right. As light as a vulture. Here, the Hebrew is nesher, which is usually translated as eagle, which does sound better. But the truth is, the Hebrew word nesher almost certainly refers to the Egyptian vulture, which is a beautiful bird that does live in Israel and is more common than the eagle. So be as light, and you see them sometimes floating on wind currents, not even moving their wings, waiting for prey down in the valleys. It's amazing. So as light as a vulture, as swift as a gazelle, and which their main defense against predators is their speed, and as powerful as a lion, to fulfill the will of your Father in heaven. So again, you have to be a little familiar with these animals and with nature to even understand sometimes what these rabbis are talking about. So, for example, powerful as a lion in Hebrew, the word for power, gibor, is defined in that text as meaning one who overcomes their natural or evil inclinations. How is that relevant to a lion? Well, you might know that lions are the only one of the predatory cats that live in groups, a pride of lions. For the lions to live in a group, they have to overcome their natural violent inclination. They don't attack each other. They have to be able to live in harmony with each other. So again, I'm just pointing out, illustrating some of the ways in which Jewish tradition has looked at nature as a source of inspiration and as a source of teaching for us. Another example, there is an ancient text, dates back probably to about the 8th century. It's not that old. I mean, there are older texts, but yeah, 8th century is not bad, which is called the Chapter of Song. And in this text, it gives you verses from the Bible that are attributed to various animals and plants. And the understanding is that the functioning, when these animals and plants function as they're meant to do, they are, in essence, singing some type of praise to the Creator. And they are teaching us a certain sentence. So, for example, the elephant is associated with how great are your works and your thoughts very deep. Greatness, power of the elephant, the largest African elephant, which is the largest land mammal, can weigh a number of tons and is incredible, very intelligent. They live in family groups. They have emotional intelligence. They communicate. It's an amazing creature. Or, for example, the verse in Isaiah is when it refers to lions. The verse of Isaiah is invoked to understand the greatness, the power of God, so to speak, compared to the lion. So I'm just pointing these things out. They're not directly related to the environment, but the subject is nature and the environment. And these are ways in which Judaism has always looked at various aspects of nature and the environment as a source of the wisdom of God, of a source of the knowledge of God. So, for example, you look at the verse from Isaiah. It says there, lift your eyes up high and see from where who created them. In other words, when you lift your eyes up to the heavens, when you look at the stars, the sun, you look at or to put it into more contemporary terms, you look at the universal constants, you look at the balance of the environment, you look at the algorithms that describe nature, you look at the formulae that describe nature, you look and you see intelligence here. You see a plan, you see a design, and hence Isaiah tells us, look up to the heavens and get this understanding. Maimonides, the great 13th century scholar who originally from Spain, but due to persecution left Spain, went to Morocco, more persecution went to Israel, more persecution ended up in Cairo. Lived most of his life in Cairo. He was a great Torah scholar, a scholar of Jewish law. Also, he was a physician. He was actually the physician of the Sultan of Egypt, Salah al-Din, or in English you call that Saladin. So he was his personal physician. And he talks about this idea when man contemplates the great wonders of God's deeds and creations and perceives from them his wisdom that is boundless and infinite, instantly he loves, praises, and gives glory and has a great desire to know God. Maimonides, a man not only of philosophy and religion, but a man of science as well, saw nature and science as a means to bring me closer to God, closer to spirituality, to appreciate the greatness and the love that God has given to us. Also, for example, in Ecclesiastes, attributed to King Solomon, he says, look at the work of God, for who can rectify that which he has damaged? Here he gives us not only an imperative, which is to look at the works of nature, but he also tells us it's very difficult. Well, he says, who can rectify that which is damaged? And there's an old rabbinical commentary, 2nd century Israel, called the Midrash, which actually says that when God created Adam, he took him around and showed him the world, gave him a little tour. And he said, is it not beautiful? Look at these trees. Look at this world. And God said to Adam, look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. Everything that I created for you. Take care that you do not damage and destroy my world. For if you damage it, there was no one to repair it afterwards. That's actually a fascinating insight, because we know that all animals are capable of doing damage to the environment. Elephants, as we know, damage the trees, etc. But the human being can also do damage to the environment. But unlike other creatures in this world, only the human being has the power to repair. And God is telling Adam that, you know what, if you ruin it and you cease to exist, then there's no one to repair it. As wonderful as dolphins are, they're not going to come up and repair the environment. As beautiful the birds are, they can't do it. Only the human. So the human being, because we have free will, and we are, as the Bible tells us, similar to God, just as God is a creator, we are creators. But being a creator and having that power of free will also has a negative side, which is if I have the power to create, that means I also have the power to destroy. But if you have the power to destroy, then you indeed have the power to create. And just as another example, I was just in 2 summers ago in Tanzania to see the great migration of the wildebeests and the zebras, which was absolutely mind-boggling, absolutely incredible. And there we saw acacia trees in the Serengeti, many acacia trees. Acacia trees, of course, are mentioned many, many times in the Hebrew Bible, because acacia trees exist in the land of Israel, and they were used for the tabernacle in the desert and for other things. And we believe also that there's a song, the trees of the wood sing in the presence of God. Type of interesting, just as an aside, acacia trees actually do communicate with each other, because when giraffes start to eat the leaves, the higher leaves, the acacia tree exudes a certain chemical that makes the leaves bitter. So to protect itself against the giraffes eating it, and that chemical that chemical, which exudes a scent, triggers off the same chemicals in other acacia trees in the area. So in a sense, the trees are not only defending themselves, but they're also communicating, which is just, I find that fascinating. We also, of course, we do know that there's communication even in the amongst the mushrooms and etc. So so now to get to our understanding of our environment and the nature and our relationship to it, I want to give you an example. Here is a blessing that we say every morning in the traditional prayer book. It dates back to 400 BCE in Israel, and it's the strangest blessing that I mean. It's a little strange. It's very strange. Listen to this blessing. Blessed are you, God our Lord, King of the universe. That's very standard blessing in basically. And I should point out the Hebrew word bless is baruch, which is etymologically related to the word brecha, which means the pool of a spring. When we call God blessed, what that means is he is the pool or the spring from which all of reality comes forth. So it's really a statement of description of God, that God, you are blessed, in Hebrew, baruch, meaning you are the pool from which everything, space, time, and matter, all of that comes. And we say you, God, because we have a personal relationship, hence we say you. We said our Lord, plural, because we have a national relationship with God. King of the universe, because we have a universal relationship with God, just as creatures. So we then say, but that's not the strange part. All that is that's okay. That does not raise eyebrows. The next part does. Who has given, we bless God every morning, who has given the rooster wisdom to distinguish between day and night. Folks, if you've ever been woken at 4 o'clock in the morning by a rooster, the last thing you want to do is say, well, thank God for the rooster. I mean, that's not the first thought that comes to my mind. You know what I mean? I mean, seriously, and we're praising God for what's going on here. So, one of a rabbi of the 20th century, he explained it in the following way. He said this, and the rabbi explained. He said this: everything in nature is connected to the human being in ways that we don't appreciate and don't understand. It could be that the extinction of the dodo bird in Mauritius, whatever, which means that, well, you look at that, okay, some weird bird doesn't exist anymore, so what? But, as we know, there are certain trees that germinated only by going through the digestive system of the dodo bird, which means those trees are now going to be affected by the lack of dodo birds, and there's going to be less of those trees. And if there's less of those trees also serve as a habitat for various animals, or as they may serve as concealment for various animals. Though maybe those animals will be now taken over by predators, etc. And there's very famously the butterfly effect, that everything's connected. So Rabbi Kook said the following: the first manifestation of that incredible connection between the human and the rest of the environment is the crowing of the rooster that wakes me up. Because why is the rooster crowing? Unclear. It's certainly the rooster crowing does not actually prevent it from or protect it from predators. On the contrary, that does not seem a good idea, right? In addition, it's not to wake up the other roosters. They're already awake. It's not to wake itself up. I'm not sure exactly why they crow, but it's the first manifestation of my interconnectivity to the rest of creation, to the rest of the environment, is the rooster crowing. The rooster is the tip of the the tip of the iceberg of that environmental interconnection. And he says that's what we're really praising. So it's a blessing for the ecosystem. And this rabbi, known as Abraham Isaac Kook, who lived in 20th century Israel before 1948, and he was. So there's a story in which he's walking with a student of his, Rabbi Aryeh Levine. And the student, I don't know if you've ever done this, but, you might be walking along, you pass by a low-hanging branch. So his student, Rabbi Levine, pulled a leaf off the tree and just was walking along and tore it up. And Rabbi Kook stopped. And he looked at him and he says, "What are you doing?" And Rabbi Levine said, "Nothing." And Rabbi Kook said to him, "All my life, I've been careful never to pluck a blade of grass or a flower needlessly when it has the ability to grow or blossom. The teaching of our sages, not a single blade of grass grows on earth that does not have an angel above it commanding it to grow. Every sprout and leaf says something meaningful. Every stone whispers a hidden message in the silence. Every creature sings its song."
Wow.
So Rabbi Kook, the teacher, said to his student, "You were not doing nothing. You needlessly pulled a leaf, a living thing, off the tree. I understand you need to eat, take some fruit. I understand, but He says, I never disturb. And that's so this is the rabbi who explained that blessing of the rooster. He saw all of nature as something which has got every single component has a purpose. God, the infinite, omniscient creator, does not create things which are purposeless, which means, as he puts it, that's how the Talmud puts it, metaphorically, that every blade of grass has an angel commanding it to grow. What that means is that there's a spiritual component to everything. And we don't always see it. We don't always realize it, but we have to be aware that such a thing exists. And therefore, Rav Kook was someone who said, Rabbi Kook, that's what he understood. That blessing in the morning is an awareness of that. And he often quoted Psalm 145, verse 9, as you see on the bottom of the screen, that God is good to all and his mercy is upon all his creations. His mercy is upon all his creations. That there's an element of compassion and mercy that extends to everything in the world. It's interesting, in that section I quoted earlier called the Chapters of Song, where it gives the song of each creature, there's a song attributed to the naked mole rat, which is a really ugly creature. And the song attributed to it, no offense to any people who have mole rats as pets, but, it is ugly. What can I say? Right. So, but the song attributed to the naked mole rat is all creatures of God sing to you. And it's interesting. It's what it's saying is, you don't like me? Guess what? I'm a creature of God. Right. So there's a story in the Talmud actually about a man who was, I don't know what was wrong with him, but he was not pleasant looking in any way, and someone, like, as they were walking by, like, slightly turned away, and he says, you have a problem? Speak to the Creator. This is how he created me. And the same is true of the naked mole rat. Anyway, so let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of Jewish law. What are there laws and directives in the Bible and in Jewish tradition for how we treat the environment? And the answer is yes, a fair amount of them. So first of all, I know this sounds a little strange, but it's a law regarding warfare. Deuteronomy chapter 20. When you besiege a city for many days to capture it in war, do not destroy its trees and cut them with an axe, for from them you shall eat, and you shall not destroy them. Is a man a tree that you should be destroyed by you in a siege? So it's interesting. In ancient times, trees, wood was used for weapons. That was how you made ammunition, whether it was your spears or arrows, etc., were generally made. And in addition, it was not uncommon. In fact, it was very common that when an army was besieging a city or attacking another army, they would also specifically target the fruit-bearing trees and destroy them all. Not only is psychological warfare, obviously, but in addition to that, it's to destroy the environment of the enemy. The Bible actually says, no, you should not do that. These are, fruit, and specifically there are some who say it's only fruit-bearing trees, but you should not cut them down. Now, I know that sounds like a very arcane law, specifically with ancient warfare, but it's actually derived from an idea which is, or rather, we derive from here an idea which is a general prohibition against wanton destruction. By wanton destruction, I don't mean burning down Chinese restaurants. I mean wanton with an A, W-A-N-T. Okay, so there's a prohibition against wanton destruction. That's what the rabbis of the Talmud derived from that verse and expanded it much more than the narrow area of warfare. And they expanded it to every area of life, that a person should not be wasteful and a person should not destroy. For example, if you have a look, Babylonian Talmud, written in Babylon, what we call today Iraq, in the 5th century, that's the major work of Jewish law, from which all Jewish law derives, as the Babylonian Talmud, 20 or so large volumes. And it says there, Rabbi said, a person should not pour the water out of his cistern when there are others who need it. In other words, maybe you want to empty your cistern because it needs to be cleaned, etc. He says, keep in mind, there might be people who need this water. So don't just go around wasting natural resources. This is from on the screen, you see the Book of Education, which was written by an Aaron. We don't exactly know who he was. He was a rabbi in Barcelona, 14th century. That was before the expulsion from Spain. So he wrote this book as a present for his son's bar mitzvah. When Jewish boy turns 13, Jewish girl turns 12, they become adults with all the obligations of Jewish law, etc. So he wrote a book of education which covers all of the commandments, and he gives very brief ideas about each commandment. This is, I think as a present for a bar mitzvah, this beats a trip to Disney World, in my opinion. So my kids might disagree, but okay. Anyway, so this is what he says. Don't destroy fruit trees. That's the biblical injunction. He says, we have been prevented from chopping down trees when we besiege a city to distress the people of the city, to sadden their hearts. About this, it is stated, you may not destroy its trees, you shall not chop it down. Likewise, not to do any damage, such as burning or ripping a garment or breaking a vessel for no reason. Entered under this negative commandment, all of these things, wanton, wasteful destruction, and all of these matters, and all that is similar to them, may their memory be blessed, said, behold, he is transgressing on account of do not destroy. The root of this commandment is well known. It is in order to teach our souls to love good and benefit and to cling to it. Through this, good clings to us, and we will distance ourselves from all bad and destructive things. The way of a pious person and people of proper action is they love peace and are happy for the good of creatures, bring them close to Torah, and they do not destroy even a grain of mustard in the world. The grain of mustard, a mustard seed, we would nowadays say a molecule. In ancient times, in medieval times, they referred to the mustard seed as like one of the smallest pieces of matter that's imaginable. So they don't even destroy a mustard seed. And they are distressed by all loss and destruction that they see. If they can prevent it, they'll prevent any destruction with all of their strength. But not so are the wicked, brothers of destructive spirit. They rejoice in destruction of the world. They destroy themselves, since in the way that a person measures, so he is measured. There is an idea which is that our actions have reactions. God's reward and punishment is not really looked at as reward and punishment. It's really much more of a consequence of our actions. Therefore, my actions, if they're good, type of bounce back in good ways. Our actions, if they're the opposite, bounce back in negative ways. He says if people are destructive, there will be destruction on people. In the way a person measures, so he is measured. Things that he clings to it forever, as matter which is written, one who rejoices in calamity will not be cleared of evil. The one who desires good and rejoices in it, his soul will dwell in good. So there's an idea, a general prohibition in Jewish law against wanton destruction, against waste, and this is manifested in many ways. I don't have to get into the details, but there are definitely issues like wasting of food, for example. There is I don't know, you may have been to weddings, although Jewish events. We are, as a historian called us, a gastrocentric people. We're into food. We're into food. So Jewish celebrations, wedding, etc. Lots of food. Now, as much food as you can eat, there's always waste. So there are organizations, I know, in the New York and New Jersey area, which is a heavy Jewish population. There are organizations that will go to weddings, bar mitzvahs, and so on and so forth, and collect the leftover food and give it out to the poor so that it's not wasted, right? And they've got these T-shirts that you see them very often at celebrations and events. It's an amazing and beautiful thing. And there are people in our community who, if you have, let's say, I don't know, we often people may bring us chocolates or candy. So, my youngest is 23, he's not at home. My wife and I don't eat a lot of chocolate and candy. So, there's a person who collects to give it out to families who cannot necessarily afford that. Don't waste stuff. Don't throw it out. Very important idea. So the next, which you have on the screen, is a very, very famous commandment, which is the sabbatical year. The sabbatical year is every 7 years in the land of Israel, and a lot of people still observe this, many farms, etc., which is during that year. If you look in the verses, it's not totally clear. You shall sow your fields for 6 years, you shall prune your vines. On the seventh, there'll be a Sabbath for the land, a Sabbath for God. Don't sow the field. Now, what that means is during the sabbatical year, you're not supposed to plant new crops. And this is not so well known, you're supposed to allow people, people and animals to just walk onto your field and take what they want from your field. So it's type of interesting. Every 7 years, I'm a farmer, let's say. And you work hard on the farm, 6 years. Every seventh year, the Bible tells us that we have to just let go. You know what? Animals want to run onto the field and eat it, leave them, let them do it. There are people who want to get fruit and vegetables from your farm. You have to let them take it. You're allowed to do whatever is necessary to sustain the crops that are there, like the watering, etc. But major agricultural work is simply not done. And it's supposed to be, a year of Sabbath. Now, what's the simple meaning behind this? Two ideas. First of all, if you look, I've got Maimonides in his Guide for the Perplexed, which is his book of philosophy. He says the purpose of some of the commandments that we have listed in the laws of the sabbatical year and the Jubilee is every 50th year, is compassion to people in general and for the benefit of humanity. That at least once every 7 years, there's an equality. The landowner and the person who doesn't have land, the person who may be wealthy, the person who's a little poorer, the person who grows crops, the person who needs food, there's an equality there. They can come onto the field and take what they need. They can't take, fill bushels of it and then sell it. You're not allowed to sell it. No one's allowed to sell it, but you're allowed to take from someone's field. An amazing benefit to the whole country. But in addition, also, so the land shall increase its productivity after laying fallow for the year. There was a recognition that overworking land has negative impacts, and it's a type of thing which one has to be careful about. So, and as you see here also, I'll go a little faster now. There is a biblical obligation that when you build cities in Israel, you're supposed to leave 2 strips around the cities of 1,000 cubits, about 3 feet. So one strip of about 3,000 feet width around the city for agriculture and for animals to graze. And then another strip of 2,000 cubits, i.e. 6,000 feet, just as nature. As Maimonides puts it, the reserved areas around the city have been explained in the Torah, that's the Hebrew word for Bible, as consisting of 3,000 cubits in all directions from the walls of the city outwards. The first 1,000 is a reserved area for agriculture, and the 2,000 cubits from there outwards is for fields and vineyards. I'm sorry, the 1,000 is a reserved area. What does it mean by reserved area? Jewish law says that every city has to be surrounded by, I think I would call it a nature strip, meaning an area which is not developed, no agriculture. I mean, whatever naturally grows is fine, but just an area of nature, just to leave it. Now, what this would have the impact of is, number one, is it would keep the city limited. Instead of having mega cities, you'd have smaller cities, because you're not allowed to encroach upon those strips, which means that's a great thing, because it means that the city is now a smaller city. You want to build another city, but it's not going to be expanded to these megalopolises, which generally are not great. And if you look at the next page, just for example, the Talmud says that, let's say couples having a discussion about where to live, That's, there's one of the major causes of divorce is arguments about where to live. So, so it says this: you cannot force your spouse to move from a small town to a large city, since dwelling in a large city is difficult. So Rashi was a great commentary on the Bible, lived in France, 11th century, in the Champagne region. He says, because so many people dwell there, it's crowded. Houses are close to each other. There's no fresh air. A small town has gardens, orchards close to the house, and the air is good. So Rashi wrote this in 11th century France, living in a place called Troyes. He understood that the reason you can never compel your spouse to move to a large city from a small place is because the air quality in cities, the crowding, not good. We have other laws. For example, you can only put waste in the public property if it will be taken away immediately. That, by the way, is a decree attributed to Joshua when he first came into Israel in 1270 BCE. One of the decrees he made was you have to keep your waste and garbage somehow contained. You can only put it out if it will be collected immediately, meaning they must have had some type of system of collecting garbage. You must distance a permanent threshing floor from the city 50 cubits, carcasses, tanneries. In other words, bad odor. There's a recognition that the environment for where people live should be kept clean and clear and without terrible odors. And as Maimonides points out, there's smoke, sewage, dust, and the like, movement of ground are all areas where you can sue to cause a person to cease and desist. Just to end on a less legal note, a quote from a rabbi who lived in England and later on Israel in the mid-20th century, Rabbi Dessler, his name was. He writes, he wrote this this was a speech he gave in 1944. Human beings believe in their arrogance that if they continue developing the world on the basis of an ever-expanding science and technology, they'll eventually achieve an environment that will afford everyone unlimited gratification of the senses and a life of untrammeled ease and pleasure. There could be no greater error than this. There's a certain arrogance that people have that we're okay. I'll do what I need, do what I want. And just by the advancement of science, and science is wonderful, technology is fantastic. I love my gadgets. I like Zoom, right? But right, there has to be moral guidance, moral limitations, etc. One of the ideas behind the Sabbath in Jewish tradition is to have one day where we're just not messing with the world. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but observant Jews who observe the Sabbath and the festivals, we don't drive on Sabbath. Unless it's a life and death emergency, we don't drive. We live in walking distance. You want to get somewhere on the Sabbath once every 7 days, Friday night to Saturday night, we only walk. So that's just simply reducing carbon emissions by 1/7, at least from our population. But it's a way of saying I don't pluck a flower on Sabbath. I don't water plants. I just leave the world as it is one day a week, an appreciation of God's world, and ceasing our technological power and overpowering of the environment and of the world one day a week gives you a balance, gives you at least a balance. And, as Rabbi Joseph Ber Soloveitchik, who taught where I teach in last century, I'm responsible, he says, I am responsible, a little bit of a different take from Descartes. He says, I am responsible, therefore I am. Humans have the ability to choose to do evil, and therefore our responsibility to exercise our freedom of choice properly is tremendous. Rabbi Dessler says the root cause of the destruction of the world, of nature, is one thing. It is selfishness. It's a lack of appreciation. Who is rich? Our Mishnah says, he who is happy with his lot. The more we appreciate what God has given us, the more we appreciate the world and nature, that we make a blessing, as I started by saying, we say the Psalm 104 and say, wow, what an incredible world. What beautiful interaction. We appreciate the interaction of myself with the rest of nature. We appreciate the intertwining of all aspects of nature. We see what we can learn from God's creation. The more we appreciate that, the happier we will be. And the person who appreciates will be less driven to accumulate more and more material stuff, accumulate more and more cars, more and more houses, more, that's where a lot of our problems come from. is really, I think, just selfishness and a lack of appreciation and contentment with what we have. Certainly, ambition is a good thing in certain areas, but ambition has to be tempered by appreciation of the world that God has given us. And that's a little bit of an introduction. As the great Talmudic sage Hillel said, the rest is commentary, go and learn. I understand that you're doing that every Friday. So thank you for inviting me. I'm now going to take questions, heckling, insults, political statements, endorsements, etc. So
Okay, Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and thank the rabbi and open up for Q&A?
Yeah, thank you for coming and speak with us. I loved it. I had a lot of good laughs too. I know we all did.
Yes. That is.
Did anyone have any questions? I'm sorry, Desmond, as you were saying, it was we all were giggling a little bit.
Oh yeah. That's the humor also makes the point even more powerful, impactful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
it's amazing. We have no questions. This is the age of Aquarius.
So yeah, I could start.
Desmond,
Yes,
Okay.
Trevor,
I have a question.
go ahead.
So, my question is, what's the role of Judaism with the environmental movement today in America? I haven't. I know you seem to be speaking primarily within the Jewish context, but how does this ideas that you have talked about uh, it's expressed, to the nation, or how do you get involved in movements in the nation to try to help the environment and so forth and so on? Yeah.
That's a great question. Great question. So first and foremost, although we may agree in practice with some of the practices of the environmental movement, in other words, we encourage not to waste. We encourage our community, as I said, we don't drive. A sixth of the year, we just don't use our cars. We don't drive. A sixth of the year, we don't use the lawnmower, etc. So we agree in principle with a lot of them, but we may have disagreements with the environmental movement in a couple of areas. And that's why not necessarily will you find observant Jews, religious Jews, being part of the movement. And I'll tell you why. Ultimately, we believe that there is divine providence, meaning that there is a strong and major belief that God ultimately is in control. And yes, humans have to make their best efforts, without doubt. We have to go to doctors and we have to, recycle and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we're not panicked. And we're not panicked because at the end of the day, we believe in divine providence. That would be one possible difference. A second difference might be that we are anthrocentric. In other words, Jewish tradition believes that the human being is the center and the ultimate purpose of the universe, which means that the environment is here ultimately for the human to reach a higher level of morality, spirituality, and relationship with God, as opposed to the other way around, that we are just merely part of the environment. So that has certain ramifications. One ramification would be that we are allowed to use the environment for human uses in Jewish tradition. I can't be wasteful. I'm not allowed to be destructive, but I'm allowed to use the world. I'm allowed, for example, if I need it, to eat meat. As you know, I was once on the plane. I forgot where I was going, but I got my kosher food, and the person next to me says, "Oh, what is that?" I said, "It's a kosher meal, conforms to Jewish dietary laws." She says, "But isn't that meat?" I said, "Yeah, it's meat." She said, so the person said to me, "Oh, I don't eat other animals." I said, "Madam, neither do I." In other words, I don't look at myself as another animal. We look at the human being as distinct and central and morally with free will, as opposed to animals that do not. So there may be some ideological differences between us and what you call the environmental movement, and hence you won't find us necessarily and I can't speak for anyone else, but observant Jews that I know, not necessarily part of that movement, even though we might agree in practice with a lot of the practices of the movement. I think there's one other factor, which is that and this is historical, really, more than anything else, for centuries, really for approximately 2,000 years, we have been struggling with survival. That is to say, there's been persecution. We have, and we still have today, people who want to eradicate Jews from the face of the planet. We've had that a number of times in history. So historically speaking, we have had, and we still have, a focus on survival. You know, if I am swimming, if I'm in the ocean holding on for dear life to a life raft, and someone tells me, I think your pen is leaking into the ocean, you know what I mean? That might not be my greatest priority. You know what I mean? I'm holding on, right? So the same is true of the Jewish people. We do have people who want to get rid of us off the planet, right? Many times in history. So from a historical perspective, there's a national Jewish consciousness to a great degree, sometimes not necessarily being part of this movement, that movement, because we are clinging to a life raft to some degree, and hence not necessarily joining that movement, even though, as I said, we may be in agreement in many areas.
Right. Yeah.
I forgot to mention, just for example, hunting. Jewish tradition, Jewish law actually says that hunting animals is prohibited. People do it for sport. There was someone in Czechoslovakia, now it's the Czech Republic, but back then, 1700s, Czech Republic. It was a Jew who owned an estate, and he wanted to take some friends hunting, entertain some business partners. And he asked a rabbi there, a famous rabbi in Prague, and the rabbi said, first of all, he says, hunting is prohibited. He says, the only hunters we know of in the Bible are Nimrod and Esau, not great role models. He says, secondly, how could you get joy from causing an animal fear and pain? And he mentioned something fascinating. He says that, when someone gets a new suit, for example, there's a blessing I say to the person, which is wear it out long enough and get a new one, which is it's a nice blessing. So, but he says, we don't say it when someone has leather or fur. Right, because I don't want them to wear it out and get a new one, because wearing it out and getting a new one means another animal's got to die, or so while it's true I'm allowed to wear leather, well, actually my wife doesn't let me, but Jewish law does, right? I can wear, but in essence I'm not blessing someone to say, oh yes, get it more. So we do agree, let's say, with many aspects of the animal care for animals, etc., and the environment, but not necessarily part of the movement. I hope that answers. It's a long answer, but that was okay.
Yeah, I think we got the gist. There's always nuance, and that was really explained really well. Thank you. I have a question too. Oh, Trevor, did you want to follow up? No? So I have a question as well. The tradition of, you said there is a tradition of starting each month with a reading or meditation on Psalms 104.
Yes.
Where and when did that tradition begin? What is the significance of it? I mean, of all the Psalms, why this one every month?
That's an excellent question. Excellent question. So the formal prayer service that we say every single day, 3 times a day, was initially composed approximately 2,500 years ago in Israel at the beginning of the Second Temple era. That was the basic format of our prayers, and special prayers were instituted for the first day of each month. Now, it's unclear if that's when this psalm was introduced. Very likely it was introduced later in around the 9th century by the Babylonian rabbis known as Geonim. So it does go back, it may go back 2,500, but it goes back at least till the 9th century. Why that psalm was introduced is because since our calendar is very focused on natural cycles, like the moon, when there's a new moon, that's the beginning of the month. full moon is the middle of the month, no moon is the end of the month. And so therefore for Jews, the month is part of a natural cycle. It's not just arbitrary. And so therefore, I guess those rabbis felt this would be a good time to include in the prayers a meditation on the wonders of creation and the wonders of nature. Since we're anyway focused a little bit on the moon, new moon, time for it's.
Right.
I mean, obviously there's a set calendar, and it's been calculated. Was calculated from 356 CE to present time, and for another 1,000 years or so. But nevertheless, we are focused a bit on that. So they felt it would be a good time to include that. That's not the only thing we do on the first day of the month, but it is a psalm that is added to our regular service. Yes, on the first day of every month. And I said it this morning in the synagogue, and so I thought it would be a good place to start with this.
It was excellent place to start this Environmental Fridays. Thank you for that and for the history. So are there other questions and comments? I have more, but I don't want to take up everything here. Questions, comments? Okay, if no questions, comments,
Just a quick comment. This
okay.
makes so much sense. It
Yep.
provides a balance.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you for having me, everyone. It was great to speak to you all, and God willing, we'll see you around sometime.
So hold on, I got more questions.
Oh, you do?
Yes. Yeah, so all right. So your tradition, has reverence for nature. It's a source of inspiration, wisdom, and knowledge. What's the connection to science? Because at least my understanding is that other cultures were more interested in, for example, what you brought up, what's the smallest particle of matter? And other different scientific. I haven't really read, which doesn't mean there isn't, like historic works of science or thoughts on science from the Jewish tradition. It's mostly philosophy, and those sort of things. What's your comment on that?
Well, in ancient times and medieval times, Jews were fairly heavily involved in science. Maimonides, who I quoted before, was a physician. Nachmanides was a physician. There are 4 craters on the moon named after Jewish rabbis who are astronomers. The Rabbi Levi crater, who invented Jacob's staff, which is an astronomical instrument. Jews were involved in mathematics and etc. But because through much of until modern times, Jews were very restricted from, for example, in Christian Europe, until the 1800s, till the 19th century, Jews could not go to college unless they were baptized, with the exception of Padua, University of Padua in Italy, and a university in Prague. So that means we were not allowed into. The condition of going to college was to give up your Judaism. In the Muslim world, there were ups and downs. In Spain, for example, which is where most of these Jewish scientists I mentioned were actually from Spain. We lived under the Muslims fairly well, and we were able to participate in academia and so on. But there were much of history in other places, especially under Almohads and other Muslims like the Shiites, etc. Jews were also quite restricted in engaging the public sphere. Of course, when you get to the 19th century, 20th century, 21st century,
right.
So there's been a lot of involvement in science. But
Yes.
we see science, and this is how traditionally the great scholars have seen science, is, on the contrary, the greater the progress of science, the more that tells me that the world makes sense. The more the world makes sense, the more I can believe that there is a God who gave it that sense. Albert Einstein put it, he said, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is its comprehensibility. In other words, a priori, you wouldn't imagine that a random, arbitrary universe would make sense, but it does. We have algorithms, we have these beautiful formulae which explain and describe nature. To us, to borrow a phrase from Stephen Hawking, that's what puts the fire into the equations that give our world its meaning. The fire in the equations is God's intelligence and God's creation. So we have a very positive view towards science, and we did contribute in medieval times, depending on the environment, but very often, due to anti-Semitism, it was not something that we were involved in the public field.
Yeah, and so it sounds like, well, you've probably heard the phrase that we are sort of like the intelligence of the universe, that through us humans, the universe is basically understanding itself.
Well, we would not attribute personality to the universe or to nature. We attribute that to God and to the human being who's similar to God. So I don't know if there's an entity that I would call the universe. That that's for me a little bit of a stretch. But I would say that I'd agree that the greater our understanding of nature and the universe, then the greater our integration into God's plan for the universe and for nature. Which is slightly different, but again, but in practice might be very similar because we're going to be interested in that science.
Right. Okay. So Jennifer, do you have any comments, questions? You want to go ahead, and if not, we could close.
No, I didn't have any comments. I did like what you said about the gastrocentric. I recently went to a Sukkot party, and upon walking in, there was a table full of food, and I was immediately encouraged to eat. So I definitely understand.
There you go.
Yeah, and there is a lot of research going on too. When you mentioned the acacia trees, there's a lot of research going on, not just on that tree and the mushrooms, but plants in general. I think it's pretty much well established that they communicate.
Yeah. Again, it's not conscious communication. This is
right.
just a chemical reaction, but there's definitely what we call communication between, that's fungi and trees. Yeah.
Yes. All right. This was I learned a lot. I want to learn more. So some of these texts that you were referring to, is there some one that you would recommend as a place where we could look? For example, to be specific, when you were making the analogies or the statements about the meaning and inspiration from plants and from animals, and for us, when we read the Bible and other texts, how could we fully understand that? Are there texts out there?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
In English, there is the book. I'm just looking for it here. There are a number of English translations of that particular text, and one with an excellent commentary. And it's it's obviously you can get it on Amazon. I don't, but you can get it wherever you want. But it's called the Song of the Universe.
Oh, okay, that would be a nice one.
The Song of the Universe by a Rabbi Feuer, Feuer.
Feuer.
Correct. And there's another one which I think is even better.
Okay.
Which is called it's called the two. One is called the Torah Encyclopedia of the Animal Kingdom. which
Torah.
is written by the Torah Encyclopedia of the Animal Kingdom, written by a Rabbi Slifkin, Slifkin, which is an amazing volume that talks. It's not much so much about plants, mainly about animals, but animals in the biblical perspective, what we learn from them, how they're described. Fascinating book. The guy who wrote it, good friend of mine, has a museum of biblical natural history in Israel, which he has all the animals and plants mentioned in the Bible. He's got them there. I mean, most of them. And so with their significance. So it's a fascinating book. Those are two books I'd recommend.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll be checking them out.
Okay.
Thank you so very much. So we want to again thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you for delivering a really inspiring, knowledgeable, discourse on this topic. And we want to also thank Jennifer for being our co-host here today. Thank the audience for showing up and participating. And we hope that we'll see you all again next week. If it's Friday, it is environmental. Fridays, it is personal. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. We thoroughly enjoyed you. I've learned so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.